Hello my people, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I will be simplifying the JavaScript callback. So right here, if you look on my screen, you will see a simple function. I will be using it to describe and explain the JavaScript callback. So make yourself comfortable, relax, and enjoy the show. So on my screen right here, I have this simple function. The first function here I have is a function called greet. The second function is a function called say goodbye. And here I'm just calling this function greet. So first of all, I will simply explain what callback means. What is a callback in JavaScript? A callback is simply a function passed as an argument into another function. And how do I mean? Practically, look at this function called greet. If you come here, I'm calling this greet at line 10, and I'm passing this function called say goodbye. I'm passing it here. You can see that I'm passing it as an argument when I'm calling this greet function. And here, if you look at it here, I'm just taking it here as the look at it, is the parameter here into this function called greet. So it is very simple to understand. When a function is passed into another function as an argument, that is what we call a JavaScript callback. So I will show you in different use cases where you make use of JavaScript callback and why it is very important and necessary to know. So here, let me just quickly explain this code. I've just written this code to make it very quick and easier to explain. So this function here called greet is expecting two parameters. The first parameter is called name. The second parameter is called callback. You can call this stuff here anything. You can call it anything and then call it here. So if you look at it, I'm just console logging at this line 2. I'm just console logging the name here, this parameter name. I'm just using the backtick and say hello name. Then this one, line 3, watch very well at line 3. I'm calling this function, this is our parameter here. I'm taking it and call it. Remember, when you are calling a function, I'm interchanging these two words, parameter and argument. Let me explain it. When you call a function, the one you are passing into here, what the variable you are passing or the function you are passing here is called the argument. Why this one is called the parameter? So now, this place now, if you look at line 3, you see that I'm calling this function, this parameter, I'm taking it and I'm using this parenthesis to call it, which means it's a function, and I'm calling it here. So what it does is that once I call this function, when the first one is to console, the way the code will run, the pattern is that the first one is to console log this line 2, then call this function. It will call this our parameter here, this callback. It will call this callback. Look at, I've just console. I said call the function, call the callback function, to just call it, and whatever that is written inside this function will happen. So let's go to our browser and see what you have. So now I'm calling this function called greet. I'm passing this first argument. The first argument is actually a string by John. Then the second argument is this function called say goodbye, which is our what? Callback. So let me go to my browser and I will show you. So if you come here now, you see that, let me just reload so that everything will start. You see here now, the first one is to console log that name. It will say hello John. Then the second one, it will call that callback function, which is, let's go and see what our callback function is doing. Our callback function is also console logging goodbye. It's console logging goodbye a string. You see, so what, when it call this function, it will just call this, when it call this callback here, it will just, this function will run. So let me just add something here. Let me just say goodbye John. Actually, John is not my name. I'm just using it for example. So let's go back to our browser. So if you come here, you see goodbye John. You see, it will just say goodbye John. So the callback here is very important to know. It's just an argument that you pass into another function. When you take a function, this is it. Look, if you remember, these are just different independent functions. When you take a function here and pass it into another function, it becomes a callback. Okay, if when you take a function and pass it to another function as an argument, it becomes a what? A callback. So I will show you another example. Let me quickly show you another example. So in this example, I'm just trying to explain how you can also use your callbacks for asynchronous operations. Let me explain what asynchronous operation means. Asynchronous operation means when your functions and your code are running independently, no one is blocking each other. That's what we mean by asynchronous. Let me show you. This function, this is a simple function called delay greet. Delay greet is expecting two parameters, the name and the callback as well. So now I've also written this function called say goodbye. So inside this function, I have a set timeout. I have this set timeout here written inside this function, and I've already passed. Remember also that this function here, this function I also passed into this set timeout is also a callback. So inside this set timeout, I am console logging this name. I said console log this name, hello name. Okay, are you getting me? So if you have question or any confusion, please make sure you leave a comment below. I will answer you. So now I console log this at this line 34. At line 35, I'm calling this just like what we did previously. At line 35, I'm calling this function, and what I'm saying and why I'm using this set timeout is to delay this. I want to delay this function. I want to delay before. I want to give a 1 second delay before this function say goodbye is being called. That's why I'm using set timeout. So what I'm saying here, I'm saying wait for 1 second, then call this callback function. That's why I'm using set timeout, and this is where the asynchronous operation knowledge is very important. So if you want to know more about asynchronous operation, please leave a comment below and I'll make a video on it. So here, if you come here now, you see that after 1 second, let's go. Okay, let me just put it to 2 seconds so that it will delay and you will see it very clearly. Let me just say wait for 2 seconds. Okay, wait for 2 seconds. Okay, so I will go to my browser back. I'm calling this function called delayed greet. I'm passing in the first argument, which is the first argument is what? String, is a string called Alice. The second argument is the function. This is our callback function. So let me go back to my browser and see what is happening there. So I will come, let me clean or reload again. So as you come here, this is actually their first function we wrote. This is the second function. You're saying, let me just clean up this. Watch very well. You see that second function will wait for 2 seconds before it will call that goodbye, that Alice. Look, watch very well. You see, wait for 2 seconds before it will call that hello Alice goodbye. Let me reload it again. You see, it will wait for 2 seconds. This is where this callback function is very important to know, and also using it in an asynchronous operation. So I'm just saying here, wait for 2 seconds before you call this function. So assuming you have a code, that you don't want it to run immediately when the other code is running, you can use set timeout and say wait for 2 seconds before you call this another function. Then you pass this as an argument. I hope this is clear, but if you don't understand anything, please make sure you leave a comment below and I will respond to you. So, and we can as well book a one-on-one call and I will explain more. So let me also show you another function. Let me also show you another example how you can use the callback function to handle custom errors. Okay, so let me quickly comment this out. So I have this another function that I want to explain. This is where I'm using the callback function with error handling. So what I'm doing here, I have this function called, well, let me explain first. Let me just be very clear. I have two functions here. The first function is called the divide function. The second function is called the handle results function. These are different separate functions on their own, all right? So now let me show you something. Let me quickly show you something. Let me comment this one at first. Okay, let me just leave it. So this one here, this function is expecting three parameters, a, b, and callback. So here I'm using if statement to check if b is equals to 0. If b is equals to 0, so I want to call this callback function and pass in two parameters. I'm trying to make it to look more sophisticated, okay? So that I want to make it more complex. So this callback here, I want to show you something. There's something I want to show you. Pay attention. This callback here now, you see that this callback, I'm passing to another argument into it. The first one is the error, the new error I'm passing, and the second one is the null value that I'm passing into it. Then here again, what I'm saying is if b is equals to 0, call this callback function and pass these two arguments into it. S, call this callback function, pass another two arguments into it, the null and the null and this mathematical variable, this a over b. Okay, So what is happening here is I'm in this handle error, I'm saying if error is true, if we have error here and the result, if error is true, then console log error. Else, if error is false, I'm saying, let me just delete this one. So I'm saying that if error is not true, if it's not true, then we should console log the result. So if you want clear, let me just go to my browser. I think that's a very better way to explain this. Let me clean this, reload it. You see that the result is 5. Let me show you again. So here now, when I call this function called divide, when I call this function, I will pass 10 and 2 and the function called result as our argument. I'll pass it, and then it becomes a callback into this function. Okay, so here I'm passing, let me pass 2. Here you see that b here is 2, so b is not equals to 0. So it's running this block of code, it's calling this function here and pass the error as null. So here now error is null, so this second function will run, this if this s code block will run, which is console logging our result. So our result is now a over b, which is 10 over 2, and it will now console log the result here. This is what we are actually console logging as the result here. I don't know if you understand me. So if there's something you don't understand, please make sure you leave a comment below. So now I'm calling this callback and it will console log this result. So if I pass in 2 here, as I've already showed you, the result is 2, is 5. If I pass in 0 here, let's make b 0. Let's make it 0. And if I make it 0, you see that it's going to console log that error division by 0. You see, we are passing that custom error there, and it will just console log that error. You see there. So what I want to show you again is when you pass in a function, this function that is expecting this, our callback function is expecting 2 parameters. All right. When you pass it into another function as a callback and is expecting this parameters, please don't put this parenthesis. Don't do something like this. Let's say this error. Don't do something like this and say error like this way. Don't do it. Okay. Just call it this way, the way it is. Call it there, and JavaScript will handle that callback. Whenever you call it, JavaScript, they will handle the arguments. Whenever you call it, that's when you pass in those arguments. Okay, don't put that parenthesis there. All right. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you benefit anything from the video, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. This is a very simple way to support me to make more tutorial videos. Okay, I love you guys. Let's see you again next week.